After David Carradine's tragic and mysterious death in 2009, the Los Angeles property where he once lived quietly passed through a few hands before falling into relative obscurity. The Spanish-style villa tucked away in the Hollywood Hills was the kind of place that lent itself to silence, high hedges, shaded courtyards, wrought iron balconies. A secluded house with a dark past, and for over a decade, it remained largely vacant or rented briefly to transient artists who never stayed long. In the summer of 2023, the house was finally sold to a couple from Minneapolis, Ryan and Claire Matheson, both in their early 30s. Ryan worked remotely as a film editor. Claire was a ceramic artist who had dreamed of living in Los Angeles since she was a teenager. When they found the Carradine house listed off-market, it was priced low for the area. Their agent said the house had history, but nothing beyond that. They moved in mid-June. The house still had some of its original fixtures: arched doorways, custom tiles, and a large dressing mirror mounted in the primary bedroom, the one David Carradine had slept in. Claire loved the vintage charm. Ryan, though, noticed the house had an odd stillness to it, like something was always listening. The first incident was small. Claire found her clay wheel spinning on its own in the garage turn studio, even though it wasn't plugged in. She laughed it off, blaming faulty wiring. Then, she began waking up at 3:43 a.m. every morning, drenched in sweat, though the room was cold. Just adjustment insomnia, Ryan told her. But every night, she'd hear what sounded like pacing bare feet on hardwood somewhere above them, though the house had no second floor. Ryan caught his first glimpse a few days later. He was reviewing film edits in the den when he looked up and saw a man's reflection standing behind him in the television screen. The man had long, graying hair and wore what looked like a silk robe. Ryan spun around. No one. The TV was off. He blamed exhaustion. But when Claire described the exact same man standing at the foot of their bed the next night, silent, motionless, they both knew something wasn't right. The dreams began. Claire would wake screaming, insisting that someone had been whispering to her in the dark. Words she couldn't understand, except the phrase, "cut the cord." She began sketching obsessively faces, twisted necks, tangled ropes, none of which she remembered drawing the next morning. Ryan installed security cameras inside and outside. Nothing ever showed up, but every morning, the cameras in the hallway were tilted ever so slightly upward, as if someone had been looking into them before backing away. The house grew colder. The lights flickered, even after the electrician replaced the wiring. Their dog, Penny, started growling at empty corners. Eventually, she refused to enter the main hallway that led to Carradine's old room. Claire stopped sleeping altogether. On July 4th, while watching fireworks through the French doors, Claire turned to Ryan and asked, "Why is he hanging in the closet?" Ryan thought she was joking, until she pointed to the walk-in wardrobe where Carradine had once kept his collection of silk robes and costumes. There was no one inside, but the chain for the light bulb was swinging slowly, and the air smelled of metal and sweat. Claire collapsed that night. Her heart rate spiked and she couldn't breathe. Paramedics said it was a panic attack, but her hands were rope-burned, with raw friction marks along the wrists. They called a local medium the next morning. Her name was Soline, and she arrived with no fanfare. She walked through the house silently, pausing in the old master bedroom. She turned to them and said, "He's confused. He doesn't know he's gone." David Carradine's death had always raised questions: accident or something darker. Soline believed the energy in the house was stuck in a loop of trauma and performance. "He was always playing someone," she whispered. "And now, he doesn't know who he is without an audience." She tried to help the spirit move on burning sage, playing a Tibetan bowl, chanting softly. For 3 days, nothing happened. Then, on the fourth night, Claire and Ryan both awoke to the sound of a man crying. It lasted only a few seconds, but after that, the house seemed still. No more footsteps, no more pacing. The cameras stayed in place. But one thing never returned to normal. Claire never touched her clay wheel again. She said her hands didn't feel like her own anymore. And in the far corner of the den, the vintage mirror the one Carradine had installed himself remains covered. Ryan taped it over with black cloth. Because even now, when no one else is in the house, He says he sometimes sees someone moving in it, but only in the reflection. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. The days following the medium's visit were quieter but not still. The light no longer flickered, but the shadows inside the house grew longer, heavier somehow, even under the harsh California sun. The rooms were darker than they should have been. Ryan began to notice that the hallway connecting the kitchen to the main bedroom, a narrow stretch of original oak flooring, seemed to shrink when he walked it at night. It felt as though the walls leaned inward just slightly, breathing, flexing, as if trying to remember their old dimensions. Claire had stopped sculpting entirely. Her once beloved garage studio had become a tomb of unopened boxes and dust. She didn't say it aloud, but Ryan knew she wouldn't enter that space anymore. He'd found the clay wheel once again turning on its own, this time with a small coil of twine pressed into the soft spinning surface, as if left there intentionally. By the second week of August, Ryan had taken to sleeping in the guest room. He told Claire it was because her sleepwalking had returned that he couldn't risk her hurting herself while drifting in and out of consciousness. But in truth, it wasn't the sleepwalking that scared him. It was her voice. Claire, who had always spoken with softness, a measured, poetic rhythm to everything she said, now sometimes woke in the middle of the night speaking in low, guttural syllables, her mouth barely moving. Words that weren't hers. Names they didn't know. She'd turn her head sharply, as though speaking to someone just out of view, then fall back into sleep like a puppet whose strings had been cut. More than once, Ryan caught her standing in the doorway of the old master bedroom in the dark, motionless. The door would creak open slowly, and there she'd be barefoot, her fingers slightly curled inward, eyes wide and dry, not blinking, not seeing. "Claire," he would whisper, stepping closer. "Are you awake?" She never answered. But once, she tilted her head and smiled. Not her smile. Too wide. Too knowing. One afternoon in late August, Ryan returned from running errands to find the back courtyard flooded with sunlight, still and quiet. The silence was almost luxurious. For a moment, he wondered if they'd turned a corner, if the house had finally exhaled whatever weight it had been holding. Then he saw the back patio door open, gently swinging. The air was still, and yet the heavy glass panel moved like something had just passed through it. He stepped outside. The terracotta tiles beneath his feet were warm. He noticed the large ceramic pot near the base of the lemon tree had been moved, dragged a few feet to the right, its trail visible in the thin layer of dust. "Claire, maybe?" He called her name. No answer. Then he saw it. On the edge of the ceramic pot, a small, torn photograph. Faded. Water-damaged. Polaroid, maybe. It had been folded and refolded so many times the paper was soft like cloth. The image showed a man shirtless, hands on hips, standing in a dim room, looking directly at the camera. Ryan's throat tightened. The man's expression was unreadable, almost confrontational. The quality of the photo was bad, grainy, distorted, but unmistakably. It was David Carradine. Ryan dropped the photograph. He rushed back inside, calling for Claire louder now. His voice echoed through the tiled kitchen, the hollowed-out living room. No answer. He climbed the stairs two at a time, even though they creaked strangely now, not just from weight, but with a kind of resistance, like the house didn't want him upstairs. The master bedroom door was wide open. The blackout curtains had been torn down. They lay in a heap on the floor like discarded fabric from a theater stage. Sunlight poured into the room, hitting the long mirror on the far wall, which until now had remained covered in black cloth. The cloth was gone. The mirror gleamed in the late afternoon light, and Claire was standing in front of it. She didn't turn when he entered. She stood inches from the glass, her fingertips barely grazing the surface, as though testing for temperature. "Claire," he said quietly. "I see him," she said. Ryan stepped closer. "What?" "In the reflection," she said. "But not me. It's never me." Ryan turned his eyes toward the mirror. Claire's reflection was there, sort of. But it was wrong. Her posture was rigid, almost regal. Her clothes weren't the ones she was wearing. And just behind her image in the mirror, a second figure began to resolve, not clear at first, more like fog on glass. Then it sharpened. A man in a silk robe. Pale, tall, with a bruised, purplish mark around his neck, faint like a forgotten memory. His eyes were wide, almost eager. Ryan staggered backward. Claire didn't move. She whispered, "He thinks I'm his audience." Then the mirror cracked. A thin hairline fracture, from corner to corner. And for a second, just a flash, Ryan saw his own reflection in the glass look away from him, toward the ghost, toward David Carradine. The crack in the mirror deepened over the next week. At first, it looked almost accidental, a faint zigzag splitting across the glass like a flaw in time. But as the days passed, Ryan became convinced it was widening. It didn't spider outward like a normal crack. Instead, it deepened like a wound, darkening at the center, almost pulsing. He tried to remove the mirror entirely, brought up tools, studied the edges. But the frame was fused into the wall, built as though it had grown from the structure itself. When he tried to cover it again with the black cloth, it wouldn't stay. Every morning he woke to find the fabric bunched at the floor, as if rejected. Claire spent more and more time in front of it, though she no longer said anything while standing there. She didn't even seem aware of how long she was watching. Sometimes Ryan would walk past the room and catch her in that same stiff posture, feet together, hands limp at her sides, her eyes fixed not on her own reflection, but just over her shoulder toward whatever else was staring back. He no longer asked what she saw. He didn't want to know. One night, during an unusually warm September heatwave, Ryan was awoken by the low groaning of wood, the kind of sound old houses make when they settle. But this wasn't structural. It had rhythm. It was coming from the attic crawlspace. The entrance was in the hallway, sealing a square wooden panel with an old brass ring that no one had touched since they moved in. The inspection had found nothing unusual up there, just insulation and cobwebs. Still, that night, Ryan stood beneath it in his boxers, flashlight trembling in his hand, listening to the slow, dragging sounds above. Not footsteps exactly, more like something heavy sliding, scraping then pausing. His breath caught when the brass ring moved. Not much, just a subtle twitch like something brushing it from the other side. He backed away slowly. The air felt thick, full of dust and old breath. He didn't sleep that night. Neither did Claire. Though she said nothing, she sat on the edge of the bed at dawn, her fingernails crusted with clay, which was impossible, as she hadn't entered her studio in over a month. The house began to change them. Ryan, once clean-shaven and sharply dressed even while working from home, had started wearing the same faded t-shirt every day. He didn't notice he was doing it until he opened the laundry and realized it was the only shirt he'd worn for 9 days straight. He began forgetting things: phone calls, meetings, meals. Once he blacked out for nearly 3 hours. When he came to, he was sitting in the walk-in closet of the master bedroom with a silk scarf wrapped around his neck, tied in a tight knot, though not enough to cut off his breathing. Claire's personality had dulled. She no longer laughed, no longer cooked, no longer lit candles at night the way she used to. The only thing she did consistently was watch. Through the mirror, through the hallway window, even through the cameras Ryan had set up, replaying old footage like she was looking for something or someone in the background. It was on a Thursday that she told him, "He's trying to come back." Ryan stared at her from across the kitchen, where he stood near the window holding his cold coffee. "What do you mean?" "He's not stuck here," she said quietly. "He knows. He's waiting." "For what?" She looked up. Her eyes weren't panicked. They were empty. "For a replacement." That night, Ryan watched the old interview. A friend had sent him a link months ago, one of Carradine's last public appearances. It was nothing special. A red carpet Q&A in 2008. David smiled politely, deflected awkward questions about his past, and talked about upcoming projects. But near the end, the interviewer joked, "You're always playing these men on the edge. You ever bring those characters home with you?" And Carradine, with a sudden strange intensity, had replied, "Always. That's the thing no one tells you. The role never ends." He smiled after, and the crowd laughed. But his eyes didn't. Ryan started seeing the man again, not in mirrors this time, but in corners, in reflections off chrome handles, in the window glass at night, layered over the city lights like a negative. He began to hear whispers, just before sleep, of lines from movies Carradine had never filmed. Half dialogues, stage directions. Pull the rope tighter. The audience isn't convinced. The smell of sweat, sandalwood, and iron clung to the master bedroom, even after Ryan deep-cleaned the carpet. It always returned. The dog died in late October. Penny had stopped barking weeks earlier. She'd taken to hiding beneath the house, wedged in the cool dirt under the patio. One morning, Ryan went out to find her still. Eyes open. No visible wounds. Just gone. Claire didn't cry. She looked at Penny's body for a long time, then simply said, "She saw him." They stopped inviting people over. The house no longer felt like it belonged to them. Sometimes Claire would walk barefoot through the halls at night, tracing her fingers along the walls, whispering something under her breath like stage lines, rehearsed and repeated. And sometimes Ryan would find himself standing in front of the mirror, too, not sure how long he'd been there, not sure whose eyes were looking back at him. The house seemed to stop pretending by mid-November. Gone was the illusion of silence or benign emptiness. The air inside the Carradine house had grown thick not physically, but emotionally, like breathing in old theater smoke, heavy with years of performance and ghosts of dialogue never meant to end. Ryan rarely left anymore. He no longer took meetings, no longer answered calls. He moved through the house like a man underwater. The light outside became foreign to him. Days blurred into nights. Sleep was erratic. His dreams, when they came, were not dreams at all but stage directions written in his own handwriting. Interior hallway. One man walks to the mirror. Alone. No music. Only breath. Claire had stopped being Claire altogether. She still looked like her, yes, but her behaviors had become rehearsed, robotic, cyclical. She moved like an actress running through the same scene over and over. She wore a robe now, vintage, deep burgundy with silk trim. Not hers. It had appeared one day in the wardrobe and fit her perfectly. Her voice was soft, monotonous. When Ryan asked her questions, she answered in phrases, not responses, like bits of dialogue she hadn't fully memorized. Once, while standing in front of the mirror, she turned and said, "He likes you. You don't blink as much anymore." Ryan didn't know what to say to that. He hadn't realized it, but it was true. That night, the mirror shattered completely. Ryan had woken to the sound. A single, crystalline crash. Not thunderous, not explosive, just final. Like the last glass of a show being broken on stage before the curtain falls. He rushed into the master bedroom. Claire was there, kneeling barefoot in the pile of glass, still and wide-eyed, not bleeding. Shards of the mirror surrounded her, like a cracked halo. She didn't even flinch when he entered. She only looked up at him and whispered, "He's not in the mirror anymore." Ryan felt cold crawl down his back. For 2 days they stayed out of the bedroom. But the house changed. Again. Now the ghost didn't wait for reflection. Now the presence moved freely, fully. Lights would flicker after Ryan walked into a room. Cold would come from the ceiling itself. The air inside the walk-in closet throbbed with something old and restless, as if the wood panels remembered the pressure of rope and skin. The security cameras caught nothing unusual, but the audio, it was a different story. On one clip timestamped at 3:43 a.m., Ryan heard footsteps move past the bedroom door, stop, and a deep, dragging inhale, like someone savoring air for the first time in years. Then a voice. "You're doing well. One more act." They didn't celebrate. Claire hadn't spoken for 3 days. Not a word. She wandered barefoot in the hallway, pausing at intervals like she was waiting for cues. Ryan began to hear music playing faintly at night. Not from any speaker or phone, but from the walls themselves, the warped echo of a string instrument, like a violin being tuned in an empty theater. That evening, Ryan tried to pack. He sat in the kitchen with his old backpack and a bottle of whiskey. His hands trembled. His instincts screamed at him to run, leave the house, leave her, even if just for a night. Then he heard a thud. Not loud, but heavy, from upstairs. He called her name. No answer. He ran. The hallway was darker than it should have been. The lights hummed faintly but gave off no real illumination, like stage lights stuck on a dim cue. The bedroom door was ajar, creaking gently. Inside, Claire stood in front of the closet, her back to him. The rope was there hanging from the support beam. Not synthetic, not modern. A thick, yellowed length of theater rigging, aged and worn. Where it came from, Ryan would never know. Claire looked over her shoulder. Her face was peaceful. Too peaceful. "I'm just the stand-in," she whispered. Then she stepped forward. Ryan lunged, catching her by the waist. The rope brushed her neck but didn't catch. She screamed, or someone screamed, but the sound came from the closet, not her mouth. The floor shook. The windows pulsed inward as if hit by a shockwave of breath. The chandelier above the bed shattered in place. The walls groaned, and for a split second, the entire room blurred, like a scene being refocused. Ryan dragged Claire to the hallway, both of them stumbling. The lights blew out. The smell of sweat and powder filled the air like backstage, after an intense performance. He didn't stop. He didn't look back. They ran. They never returned. They checked into a motel near Burbank that night and left for Minneapolis 2 days later. The house sat untouched through December. Eventually, it was boarded up. Neighbors reported strange lights inside. One man swore he saw someone standing on the balcony in a red robe, staring out at the street as if waiting for an audience that never came. The listing was pulled permanently in January. No one talks about the Carradine house anymore, not openly. But sometimes, on warm, quiet nights in the Hollywood Hills, when the streets are empty and the air smells of citrus and dust, locals say you can still hear the sound of a stage curtain being drawn. And if you stand by the old gate long enough, quiet enough, you might hear him say, "End scene." Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.